I'm sorry for not recognizing you right away, but you should always be careful yourself, you know, in what place we are, and to give the guy a token is alright for that, and this label is needed, says the young man. We are glad to see you. My name is Herbert. The man smiles. I'm the security captain. The hero takes off his robe cape very nicely. My name is Henry Morris. The hero says that he wants to serve. Serve? The captain asks again. Yes, I am here to fulfill my noble duty. The young man didn't think that being the heir to a baron would be so necessary. You must be a man asking. Yes, I want to help here, says the hero. Apologies for the wait. An unknown Martin enters the room after a check. I recognize these emails as authentic, and your identity is true to all documents. Leave it to me. Now could you please follow this man? The hero nods. I think the person I need to meet is a simple commander. I have a good feeling that the hero is being taken to an unknown building and a soldier is knocking on the door. Get out, says the voice behind the door. Commander, I've brought Sir June, reports a soldier. Ah, well done. Says you can go now. Welcome. Your Hans's son, right. Come, have a seat. Invites you. He found it. Yes, wed. He answers and sits down on the couch. You must have come a long way. I can't believe Hans is already settled down and has an heir. You're weird, he says, looking at the boy. This place. Everyone avoids the forest of evil. I don't know why you need to help here, because it's the forest of evil that responds back. The hero may not understand what I'm sorry, he says. I will only be able to learn how to use Ag to continuously fight strong opponents. That's why I chose the forest of evil. The hero can both mock and laugh. I like your sincerity, but you know, it won't be enough for a hero to admit that he's prepared well to survive one day. Then show me what you can do. The captain asks and pulls out his huge sword. This sword is surprised. Hero, any fool can master the imperial art, says the man. But what distinguishes a warrior from a fool is how much effort he has put into mastering it and starting out before. Such is the guy. Says shit. He whips out his sword, running, and says Martin's magic armor. He blocked the blow enough, so the young man, to be honest, didn't expect Kino to put away his sword and start attacking again. Fucking crazy, hero thinks, and applies the magic armor again. Wow, the captain repeats again. When the hero repelled his attack. Come on, commander, stop again. A girl came in. You've gone too far. Hero laughs. The other recruits didn't really know how to hold a sword in their hands, but you're probably not one of those fools. Thank you very much, sir, says the guy. The girl thinks the newcomer was able to repel 2 attacks of the commander. The new monster in our ranks will be honest with me. The captain says, why did you give up your place in the academy to the child of a mistress? Does not say that he did not see any prospects there. He heard the hero of the empire, Henry Morris, was killed. The last fighter for justice is wow. Look at this guy, says Martina. I am a knight who has shone the light of the empire all my life, and you dare to defend a traitor in my presence? Arrogant blockhead, says captain. Hold the sword in your hand. Hero is angry. I, too, have dedicated my life to the empire. To an unspecified person. There was an awkward silence about the empire. Finally, the silence breaks with the captain's mech. No, you're right, says it. You know, I like those self-made bastards. Before Henry, the empire's in chaos right now. You made the right decision by refusing to enter the academy, which belongs to the Forearm family. Hero thinks Forearm. He's talking about Kingston Forearm. Wasn't he a substitute commander in the academy? The hero asks why the academy is run by him and not by Cheesewell. Holt can pronounce that. It seems you haven't heard the latest news. Who has risen to Grand Master? They long before that. Holt had resigned. Yes, hero, since Forearmy took over the academy. Getting there has become much easier. Okay, officially welcome to Fort Liana. I'll take over your training. A man approaches a guy and taps him on the shoulder. Thank you. The commander thanks the hero. And now the criminal for the second test smiles. Martina. Will you continue to test me? Asks the hero. Well, I have something else interesting to say. They approach an unknown wall and he doesn't ask for a girl. Yes, commander, she says, and touches the door. The door opens to reveal the steps. The group descends the stairs. Why are we going there? Masha asks. I told you, I want to show you something, says the captain of the movie is not new. He asks the girl. Yes. The commander says she doesn't go to the wall. Presses a key and the door opens again, behind which the monster is standing. No, the demon, thinks the guy. Isn't that a fire hyena? Well, as the man asks, I've never seen such a thing. Have you caught him? The young man asks. He will be your last test. If you overcome him, I completely believed in you, says the captain. What's wrong with him? He's always such a surprised man. Okay, says Henry, I just need to win, right? Yes, Martina grins. Let's see what you're like in a crazy fight. The hero looks at his broken one. Here's the sly one. A magic armor casts a spell and goes to the demon, then notices movement before. He didn't pay attention to me. Thinks the guy notices a circle under his foot. "Aw, there's a barrier here." The theme is to go shouting at the guy who casts the spell himself and gets away from the demon's attack. The battle begins. The guy is a demon, but he turned out to be completely intact. Jokes aside, thinks the hero dodges monster attacks. Circular steps. He casts a spell and still thinks he is a blow. Using circular steps, Henry attacked the demon from behind, aiming for the horns growing on its back. He moved fast enough for the blow to reach the target. One swift blow and the monster roared, then fell heavily to the stone floor. Our hero dropped to one knee and picked up the black horn that he had chopped off from the demon's back. Great, he managed to pass the test. After examining the trophy, Henry threw it at the feet of the commander and his assistant, and asked if the monster needed to be finished. The commander chuckled contentedly. What a bastard, to think that he had defeated a demon. The man asked how Henry knew that horns were his weak spot. He simply replied that it was an intuition. The monster's skin was quite rough, and he thought that the best solution would be to hit the horns. The officer didn't believe the boy. Intuition and only. Henry quickly changed the subject and asked if anything else was required of him. But the commander said that this could be the end of it. He had nothing to offer Morris yet. He needed to clean up the place, and the boy could go get ready for the upcoming training sessions. But then Tinny called out to the commander, apologizing for the interruption. She reminded me that the training was already in full swing. But he just smiled contentedly. It was beautiful. It was just a matter of putting Henry in a group and learning what he missed in his spare time. The girl nodded. Morris gave the commander a curt bow and thanked him. He replied that it was not worth thanking. It was a reward for passing the tests. This opportunity was not given to everyone. As the commander turned to leave, he asked Henry if he drank alcohol. Our hero replied that he did not disdain, but was not particularly fond of it. The man, assuming that Morris was hungry, offered him a treat. The food on the table was delicious, but the commander's company was rather uncomfortable. At first, he laughed for a long time that the boy did not know how to drink at all. Then he began the typical "when I was young." Henry thought grimly that all nights were the same. But he continued to talk about the times when he didn't have a mustache. Unable to stand it, Henry tried to put the commander to sleep with magic. But the knight, after taking a sip of beer, continued his story as if nothing had happened. There was a time when soldiers would line up in front of him as soon as he showed up, shitting their pants first. And then the whole story went on the second round. And no amount of mental pleading from Morris kept up a string of tales about life at Fort Cullivan. The next morning, the military wagon set off towards the training camp. Tinny, who was accompanying Henry, asked sympathetically if he was all right. She had heard that he had not been able to sleep at night. The boy replied that everything was fine. He even felt sorry for Lady Tinny, who listened to it every day. The girl laughed softly and said that she was already used to it. Then she remembered something important. The assistant commander handed Morris a notebook of notes. When he asked what it said, she said that the semester had already started, and she had gathered some basic information for him that Henry might have missed. He expressed his sincere gratitude and delved into the study of the material. But after less than half an hour, he returned the notebook to Tinny, telling her that she could pick it up. She didn't even immediately understand what was going on. But Henry assured her that he remembered everything. He has a great memory. The girl pursed her lips a little. She knew the boy was a genius. Soon, the carriage arrived at the training base. When Henry left, the assistant commander wished him luck and told him that they would meet again. He thanked her again for her help. An accompanying knight took Morris to the base commander. The chief quickly brought the recruit up to speed. Here, when addressing them, they used the word officer. Since he was still a rookie, it wasn't appropriate for him to be impertinent and disrespectful to those who had been here longer. Henry assured the officer that he understood. Now he will become a real soldier. Henry asked if he could ask the officer a question. He agreed to listen to him. The boy reminded me that he had missed the first semester of school. Was it just the basics? He said yes. At the training base, after the end of the semester, we comprehensively test new recruits on the material they have passed. Our hero asked what happens if you don't pass the test. He was told that this had never happened before. After apologizing in advance for his indiscretion, the boy asked if he could take the test now. The officer even got angry. How could he, if he hadn't even prepared? Or does he think he's the best student? Henry said not at all. It's just that he's already prepared a bit with the commander, and he thought that if he passed the test now, he would free himself from the extra task. The officer considered. The boy was personally trained by Commander Aslan. That changed things. The head of the training base agreed to conduct the test. However, since the boy was only a cadet and such actions were considered inappropriate, if Morris failed the test, he would receive severe punishment for his audacity. He didn't mind and thanked him for the chance, but the officer decided that the recruit in front of him was just an arrogant bastard, so I was going to prepare a special test for him. Just an hour later, Henry was sitting in front of a test that he needed to solve. The officer placed an hourglass in front of him and informed him that when the time ran out, the recruit would have to give him the finished job. After getting permission to start, Henry read the assignment and even smiled. There were really good questions in the test. But as soon as half the sand was spilling down, the boy told the officer that he was done. He couldn't believe that Morris had completed the task so quickly. Less than half the allotted time has passed. But once the boy was sure, the officer started checking. And when I finished it, I was amazed. The test was passed perfectly. The officer congratulated the cadet on the highest score. Henry exhaled. Thank God, he was a little worried. The questions seemed easy enough. The man said that combat training begins at lunchtime. But for now the recruit could go to rest. If you need anything, please contact the administration. When Henry left, the officer looked back at the completed test. Now he understood why Commander Aslan was so special about this kid. Henry even answered questions that were difficult for senior officers, not to mention tasks related to mid-level tactical weapons. He did everything right. Without realizing it, our hero began to become the main topic of discussion at the training base. After lunch, he was introduced to the group. Henry introduced himself. The others reacted rather warmly at first glance, and the officer said that it was time to start training. And today Cadet Henry will serve as an example to them. Since today was the rookie's first day, it was necessary to test his skills. Morris said he understood. The teacher continued that there is no need to invent anything new, everything is the old-fashioned way. Now Cadet Henry will have a one-on-one match with his comrades. The winner is the one who continues to stand firm on the battlefield. The battle will end as soon as all the cadets are defeated. I think it was called an endless battle. Henry's first opponent was Cadet Nid, whom the teacher called forward. The two men bowed to each other and took up a fighting stance. But at that moment, Nid noticed that the newbie's stance was strange, and then he wrote him off as a dangerous opponent for himself. Just rushed into the fight, intending to technically knock out Henry. He attacked back, and then our hero's opponent made a mistake. Only as he dodged the blow did he realize that Morris was hitting with his left hand. That's why he missed a right hand that landed squarely in the temple area. And his strength was enough to send Nid sprawling on the flagstones of the training ground, and he didn't get up again. There was a moment of complete silence in the hall, and then the amazed students created a real hubbub, asking each other questions. How did it happen? What kind of nonsense happened? No one could believe that Nid had fainted from a single blow. The teacher thought that Nid was one of the best fighters, and Morris managed to knock him out, and with a single blow. He looked at the calm Henry and couldn't figure out who the bastard was. But the test had to be continued, so the man called the next participant to the battlefield. Henry was setting an insane training base record. He felled the opponents one by one until there was only one left. No one could believe it and wondered who this guy was. Pleased, Henry thought there must be about 9 people here. He had known this for a long time, but still, Hector was an amazing person. Our hero did not think that the fighting style intended for swordsmasters would be effective in hand-to-hand combat, so he couldn't believe it had worked out. At this time, the teacher called Cadet Ronan to the playground. The huge, broad-shouldered blonde man glared at Morris. The teacher noted that this cadet is the best in hand-to-hand combat, so if Cadet Henry can beat him, he'll be one of the best fighters in this base. And from the look in Ronan's eyes, he wasn't about to relinquish the title. At first, Henry thought he was just another idiot, not understanding why he was called the best in wrestling. But when the teacher announced the start of the match, it became clear that Ronan was more collected than our hero had expected. He suggested that the strongest fighters were slightly different from the usual ones, but he was still going to quickly put the enemy in their place. In fact, that was why Henry was the first to jump into the fight, moving quickly behind Ronan. But the man caught his movement and kicked back. The recruit had to go to a remote block. My hand was badly hurt. Then Morris realized that he had jumped to conclusions. This guy had a completely different level. Then Ronan was moving toward the boy, ready to attack. Henry, trying to leave the line of attack, switched to circular steps. But after a few seconds, it became clear that his opponent was moving differently. Not only did Morris have to block the blow to the face with both hands, but he also had to use his magic armor. The fight was serious. Punch followed block, then punch again. The opponents couldn't reach each other in any way. But when Henry managed to hit Ronan with a punch to the jaw, Ronan managed to hit him too. The guys almost jumped away from each other, but with the next series of attacks, Ronan managed to intercept and knock our hero to the flagstones. The man didn't even have time to react before Ronan was sitting right on top of him, swinging for the final blow. but Henry just couldn't afford to lose. Therefore, I simply cast the spell, gaining lightness in the enemy. And now Morris had enough strength to throw Ronan off with a jerk, then grab his leg and throw him straight into the wall. Naturally, just before the collision, our mage deactivated the spell, so his opponent's entire weight slammed into the rock. When Ronan slid down the wall, he didn't come up again. Everyone was in shock, even the teacher. Henry drew attention to himself, asked to announce the result. He naturally declared the newcomer the winner. So Henry Morris got the highest score on the written test, in hand-to-hand combat and swordsmanship. And I did it all in one day. In the evening, having already received a set of uniforms, our hero noticed Cadet Ronan in the barracks. The man gave his morning opponent a dark look, then pointedly turned away. Although Morris was amused that the guy was still sulking over the defeat, he decided to correct that point a little. He stepped closer and asked if he remembered correctly that the blonde man's name was Ronan. When there was no response, Henry asked permission to introduce himself properly and held out his hand in a handshake. The guy glanced at the person who introduced himself, but still shook his hand in return, and introduced himself as Ronan Forearm. Our hero shuddered, now looking at his colleague with different eyes. This guy was a member of the Forearm family. He realized it must be him, but Ronan interrupted him. Yes, he was indeed the foster son of the Forearm family, Kingston Forearm. After Sir Watchild's retirement, he was ranked as the greatest swordsman, so he received the titles of King of Swordsmen and Master. But even this did not exempt him from the noble duty. Most of the students here were adopted sons, left to fend for themselves with the burden of responsibilities. Now Henry realized what had happened to the boy in front of him. Aloud, he noticed that he understood why his sparring partner of the morning was moving so strangely. He was trained in the four-army technique. Ronan replied that he could say the same thing about his companion. This was the first time he had seen such a style of hand-to-hand combat, and the technique of swordsmanship is quite unusual. Therefore, the guy was extremely curious who is he. But Henry just smiled. The other man continued gloomily that he couldn't believe he got the highest score. Although his father might seem like a monster, some people must have seen it in him as well, and he was just unlucky. To which Henry, with a nasty laugh, remarked that if something didn't suit him, he could fight again. And Ronan gave him that grin back. But then I noticed that I was glad that Henry hadn't joined them until the middle of it anyway. He might have noticed it himself, but the other guy's skills were pretty poor. Morris agreed with him. Cadets, and even mentors. Henry asked if it was correct that Forearm had not attended the academy, and Forearm confirmed it. The academy was a place that people like him couldn't even dream of. But still, he thought that he was a little more fortunate than the others. Usually, foster children weren't taught swordsmanship. Henry thought that the other man was truly incredible. Having such skills without much training was a miracle. Ronan was indeed a talented warrior. After a little thought, our hero suggested that he become friends. Ronan was surprised at how quickly and simply he had suggested it. But Morris said he just wanted to say it. The blonde guy found it funny, so he laughed heartily. In the end, the two cadets talked for half the night. The morning at the training base started with a theory class. After lunch, hone your combat skills, and so on in a circle. And so, during the next sparring session, he again managed to defeat his new friend Ronan, and get the winner status again. Ronan wasn't exactly pleased. Cursing, he couldn't believe he'd lost again. Morris held out his hand to help him up. How would he be able to defeat the demons with such skills? Forearm accepted a helping hand, but remarked, "Doesn't Henry think he's too strong?" He said Ronan was making excuses, but that didn't stop them from shaking hands afterwards. And so, the officer gathered all the cadets in the courtyard. It was the last day of school. The next day, they had to determine where the newcomers would be sent based on their grades during training. If someone suddenly feels that they are too weak for this place, they will have a chance to change everything. So there was nothing to worry about. And now that they've finished their training, it's time to have some fun. The officer smiled mischievously as he spoke. Meat and alcohol were waiting for the cadets in the dining hall. They deserved the rest. Yesterday's boys thanked their mentor in unison. Henry was about to go along with his classmates, but suddenly his hand-to-hand combat instructor called out to him, and he said that Commander Aslan was looking for him. Morris was surprised. He followed the officer to the gate, but it was Tinny he saw first. The girl waved at him affably. They got into the wagon together, and soon they were on their way to Fort Cullivan. Tinny asked the kid how his training had gone. Henry replied that everything was fine thanks to her help. Tinny reported that the commander was very pleased with the recruit. But just in case, she noted that the commander did not call him out of a special warm attitude. Henry asked why they were going to the fort so early. The girl replied that every semester the commander calls the best cadet to personally congratulate him. And since Morris was the best cadet, Aslan wanted to see him. Then she remembered something important. The commander could grant only one of his wishes. But this was already interesting. Soon, the carriage stopped. Tinny wished Henry good luck, and he said a warm goodbye. Before leaving, the assistant commander noticed that she wasn't going to sleep tonight. So if it's needed, let him send one of the soldiers to get it, and she will report immediately. Henry was even confused by this suggestion, and he clarified what the girl meant. She only replied with a smile that he would soon find out for himself. Then she got into the cart and drove away. For lack of any other choice, our hero went to the commander. He was there with a pint of beer, clearly glad the cadet had arrived so quickly, and he'd heard that Henry was the best in his group. Aslan didn't know what the cadet might like, so he prepared everything. The desk in the office was really full of various dishes and snacks. As soon as the kid sat down, the commander repeated Tinny's words, which always fulfills one wish of the best cadet. So it's only fair to do the same for Henry. Morris smiled and thanked her for the honor. What did our hero want? In the morning, the cadets were already getting ready for service after distribution. Our hero was going with his friend. Things were put in a shoulder bag. They finally stopped at the signpost, waiting for the cart. Ronan asked where he'd been last night. He searched it. Henry answered honestly that the commander wanted to have a drink with him. His friend even cursed. Apparently, the rumors were true. Morris didn't know what he was talking about. Ronan replied that many people had said that the commander had a special attitude towards Henry. Our hero was infuriated by this. He began to protest that this was not true. The best cadet gets the right to drink with the commander, and anyone can become one. But Ronan didn't believe him. Seriously, they just had a drink together. Henry gave up and said that he had caught him. The commander also gave him a divine sword. Forearm's jaw dropped. Not every cadet could receive such an honor. At night, the commander handed Henry the divine sword and told him about it. It was almost the greatest weapon in the fortress. It was consecrated by the Holy Father. Pretty good, huh? This sword would be extremely useful for a rookie in a battle with demons. Henry drew his sword from its scabbard, and the blade glinted in the sunlight. His friend looked at the weapon with admiration. Henry chuckled and asked if he was jealous. Ronan was angry. What nonsense, of course he's jealous. But then he turned away and said no. It was stupid to be envious, and he was sure that sooner or later he would get a better sword. Morris smiled and agreed. He asked me what squad my friend was assigned to. Ronan said the 1st Infantry. Henry thought that was a good idea. The friend continued that he had a lot of prospects there. Besides, he was assigned to the 1st Division, not the 2nd. And since he is quite obedient, he can quickly become a mid-level officer. Henry thought that his friend was quite ambitious, although he didn't show it for a long time. But then Ronan asked, what about Morris? He replied that he had also joined the infantry. When his friend asked which one, Henry said it was an independent unit. Had he ever heard of the Cullivan Needle? He didn't seem to have a clue. In fact, at night, when the commander was completely drunk and passed out, Henry removed the effect of alcohol with magic. He could not get drunk. Then he went out into the corridor and asked the nearest soldier to tell Lady Tinny that he wanted to meet her. Now he was able to approach the squad allocation scheme. No wonder there were so many different squads here, since the fort was run by the Imperial Army. Henry wasn't planning on staying here for more than a year. It's not that long. Therefore, his first squad will also be his last. So he needed to get somewhere where he wouldn't be idle. Just then, Tinny came up to him. Henry apologized for disturbing her at such a late hour, but she said it was all right. And I noticed that our hero is smarter than he looks. A lot of guys misunderstood her. In fact, it only just dawned on him. Lady Tinny's hospitality earlier. She just helps the best cadets. The girl asked if he had decided where he wanted to go. Henry replied that he would like to get a job in an independent place that was not controlled by the army, so that this squad is the first to be raised in case of any situation. Lady Tinny understood that the boy wanted to be on his own team. But I was sure he had one in mind, so why be modest? Henry didn't understand, and she laughed. She was just teasing him a little. With the help of chalk, she marked out several squads on the board, and informed him that these places would suit him. Independent troops are special units of the army. Does Henry even know what it is? He replied that, based on his experience, these are units that are sent on special missions. Tinny confirmed this, and added that it was very dangerous to serve there. Is he sure he wants to go there? Henry said firmly that it didn't matter, and she understood that he wanted to move forward as soon as possible. But I noticed that it would be hard for him at first, since most independent units have a huge number of high-ranking soldiers concentrated in them, and they didn't really like newcomers. Henry asked if there was another way. Thoughtfully, Lady Tinny pointed to the squad that was slightly apart from the others in the diagram. She offered to send Henry there. This was a special unit that was under the direct control of Commander Aslan. Others wouldn't dare say anything against him because the commander liked him. And this was the best option. After all these explanations, Ronan understood what his friend was talking about. But at that moment, his cart pulled up. The farewell was brief. Henry wished his friend not to die, who laughed and wished Henry good luck. After which, the cart started moving and soon disappeared into the trees. Then Henry himself was hailed by an unknown officer. After confirming that it was indeed Henry Morris, he invited the boy into the cart. A new journey has begun. Tinny told our hero that the position of lieutenant had opened up at the Cullivan's Needle. However, it is intended for the elite. They rarely accepted graduates, so it would definitely be difficult for him. And now, as he stared at the dark look in the officer's eyes, Henry realized what he was saying. He didn't even expect to be openly admired. They arrived at Cullivan's Needle headquarters by lunchtime. Henry Morris was assigned to the Solomon squad. The supervisor reviewed the newcomer's documents, which stated that he was the best cadet on the base. Henry noticed that not all of this was true, and the boss immediately became enraged. Does the boy want to say that his mentors gave him false information? The confused newcomer corrected himself that the mentors had not lied, but he wanted to say that there was nothing special about him. Henry thought that if his boss was twisting his words like that, he didn't like him either. The still angry officer said that their opinion was different from the commander's. They still hadn't accepted the newcomer. Yesterday's cadet replied that he understood everything, but the chief was not convinced. He added that this place is not a playground. Morris has to work hard if he doesn't want to get kicked out of here. After these words, the boss got to his feet and told the boy to follow him. He will show him the room. Instead, he took him to the old barracks behind the warehouse, which was a real mess. The officer told Chap that they had a tradition of a novice cleaning up the oldest barracks where he would live with his comrades. Henry should do it by tonight. Can he handle it? But without waiting for an answer, he left, wishing the newcomer good luck. Our hero thought that the officer did not know who he was contacting. One day won't be enough to clean up this mess. An ordinary person, but not a magician. It took him several times to cast the purification and self-exploitation spells. Magic sparkled from the windows until late afternoon, but no one noticed. When the rookie's allotted time was almost up, the chief met the members of the Solomon squad who had arrived from the mission. The Special Forces soldiers returned safely. The senior requested permission to return to his barracks, but the boss replied with a grin that they should go after him. After all, a new recruit was assigned to their squad, and he's just preparing the barracks behind the warehouse. The soldiers laughed. They followed the officer in a decidedly good mood. After all, those barracks are simply huge. Their boss was as cruel as ever. The officer noticed that it had been several hours since he had issued this assignment, and he was eager to see what the newcomer had accomplished. But on the spot, they were in for a real shock. The barracks had been cleaned to a high gloss, and the furniture looked as good as new. Henry Morris was sitting at a table in the middle of the room, quietly drinking tea. He greeted the chief with a slight smile. He couldn't believe it. It was unrealistic to bring such perfect order here so quickly. Henry, looking at the dumbfounded expression on his face, thought that he had served longer than that asshole. And aloud I asked what the problem was. He had come to check out the rookie's cleaning. The officer coughed, then ordered to greet the soldiers who came for him. They were soldiers of the special forces that were responsible for performing important tasks. Henry stepped outside and noticed the cold stares of the squad. The dead lieutenant's name was Carter. He was a decorated officer who had served here for 5 years and died during one of the missions in the Forest of Evil. People here were bound together by much stronger ties than family. Apparently, they still remembered their comrade. Henry Morris greeted the men and introduced himself as the new lieutenant. The soldiers didn't say anything, and they seemed to grow even more gloomy. Henry thought that he should show them his strength to gain their respect. Perhaps it was because of this that Aslan allowed our hero to come here. Henry approached one of the fighters and asked for his name. He gave his name as Howden. The new lieutenant asked to be taken to the place where his predecessor lived. When this was done, Morris asked Howden to stay outside while he went inside. These guys haven't forgotten their old lieutenant yet, so Henry will have to face a lot of resentment. But this is the army. You can't let your emotions control you. Half an hour later, Henry came out of Lieutenant Carter's barracks with a large crate and set it down. Then he said that he understood their feelings now. They were acting like this because they couldn't forget the former lieutenant, right? Henry's speech was brutal. You couldn't stay so soft. Why didn't they become bards and sing songs about their fallen comrade? Why the hell didn't they take off their uniforms? After that, Morris poured a flammable substance over the box and, ordering no one to move, threw a burning match on top. The boys were terrified. One of them, who couldn't hold back his tears, shouted, "What the hell is the new lieutenant doing? How dare he burn their lieutenant's things?" Henry sighed, and noted how much hatred he saw in those eyes. You could even expect a mutiny from them. Morris gave them a chance to get rid of themselves. If any of them can defeat him, he will take off his badge and immediately leave. The fighter who was crying did not immediately believe these words, and said that it was better for him to keep this promise. Henry nodded and told them to attack. And the soldier, without another word, rushed at the new lieutenant with his fists. But he was already prepared for it. By using magic armor, Henry managed to evade the blow quite easily. Then he smashed the man's nose with an elbow, then knocked him to the ground with a single powerful blow to the stomach. While the squad was recovering from the shock, Henry demanded the fighter's name. He didn't answer right away, trying to stop the nosebleed. Morris sternly asked if he was going to keep quiet. The soldier managed to say that his name was Jibo. Calling the man an impudent bastard, Henry turned to the others and said they should be ashamed of themselves. Would a dead lieutenant be happy to see his soldiers like this? This really shamed the fighters, but the chief was not happy with it. He told everyone to disperse. Already in his office, squad leader Solomon was banging his fists on the table. He was shaking with anger. At this rate, a newbie will actually take the position of lieutenant. He had no choice but to apply the latter method. In the evening, he summoned two other officials important to the headquarters. They asked why the head of Solomon's company had called them. He said he had something to tell them. The next morning, our hero was called to a meeting about his appointment. In addition to the commander, there were two other officers at the table who were unfamiliar to him. Henry bowed and announced that he was going to take up a position as a lieutenant in the special forces. The blonde man introduced himself as Hugo, a lieutenant who did whatever the squad leader ordered. And the second one called himself Vogue, responsible for food and troop management. Hugo asked if, as a senior, he could speak freely to the newcomer, and the newcomer agreed. After that, I noticed that according to rumors, Henry Morris still hadn't mastered the use of aura. Henry confirmed this information. Lieutenant Hugo burst out laughing. Seriously, does the kid think they're joking around here? Does he even know where he's going? No one dared to fool around in the ranks of their organization. But our hero calmly replied that the aura is something that comes with time, so don't be so impatient. Hugo was annoyed by the rookie's words. What is this arrogant little fucker talking about? To which Henry calmly offered to test himself. The lieutenant played an important role in the work of the army. Then why do they think the commander didn't appoint someone else to the position? Maybe they were just afraid of the recruit. Hugo fell for the boy's bait. He got angry, jumped up, and demanded to fight the bastard. The lieutenant was ready to do anything to destroy it. Then he demanded permission from the captain to fight. The son of a bitch asked for it. He just has to try it out. And the captain gave it permission. As a crowd of soldiers gathered in the courtyard, squad captain Solomon realized that Hugo had brought everyone here on purpose. He wants everyone to see him destroy an arrogant recruit. And the boss found it a great opportunity to teach the boy a life lesson. Henry asked with a grin if they were so sure that this test was necessary. Were they really happy with the use of wooden swords? Hugo growled at the newcomer to calm down. The soldiers who watched agreed with the lieutenant. How dare a new recruit join the special forces? Lieutenant Hugo will definitely tear the impudent man to shreds. Watching, the captain thought that he had no idea what the brazen newcomer was up to. But Hugo was an experienced swordsman. Even he himself couldn't beat it. But he said out loud that even if they had wooden swords in their hands, the fighters should show all their power. Henry realized that he had better use all his skills now. Therefore, without waiting, I first created a magic armor. The captain gave the signal, and the enemy rushed into battle. But the duel was over in one blow. The sword in Hugo's hand simply split in half, and a chunk of it flew off to the side. No one could believe their eyes. The captain wondered what the hell was going on. How can a person who hasn't mastered aura do such a thing? It was simply impossible. Hugo stared dumbfounded at the broken sword in his hands. Our hero at this time bowed to him and thanked him for a good fight. After that, he turned around and left the site in front of the shocked crowd. That evening, Henry arrived at the captain's request. He asked if the meetings about his appointment were over. The captain placed several sheets of scribbled paper in front of him and informed him that it was a list of tasks for the new lieutenant to review. Then he said that he needed to rest and left the office. Henry was fuming. These scoundrels were still judging people by their appearance. He picked up the papers, but as soon as he read the first one, he got angry. What kind of nonsense is this? Patrol the 9th area of the Forest of Evil and kill the hyenas. And this is a special mission. It seems that Henry needed to talk to Commander Aslan. Early in the morning, Henry knocked on the door of Commander Aslan's office. Now he could introduce himself as a Special Forces lieutenant. The commander was even glad to see him, even though he hadn't expected him to appear. Henry explained that he came because it seemed that something was wrong with the mission assigned to him. Did Aslan ask what the boy meant by that? Henry explained that the commander appointed him to lead one of the units. Their task was simple cleaning. Soldiers from the main army could also do this, although Morris understood that the commander wanted him to climb to the top from the bottom on his own. The commander couldn't understand why he was complaining if he understood this. Henry explained that he was convinced of this during the battle with Lieutenant Hugo. Aslan even froze and asked if the rookie could really beat him. Morris replied that he had broken his wooden sword with a single blow. Not only Aslan, but also Tinny, who was standing next to him, couldn't immediately believe that the boy had broken the sword that Aura was feeding on. The commander even warned him not to lie. But Henry said he could check for himself, and almost everyone at headquarters had seen the fight. Aslan grinned. It seemed that the weekend started with interesting news, and then he laughed. The commander is ready to listen to the newcomer if everything really was like this. What task did the new lieutenant want to perform? Henry replied that he wanted to go to the 6th area. Aslan clarified why it was there. Our hero thought that it was not necessary to tell the commander that his treasures should be there. He hadn't checked them out in a long time, so he was going to work hard on this matter. After some thought, Henry replied that he had never been there, but he had heard that the 6th region was one of the main regions patrolled by special forces, and he wants to test himself. Aslan replied that he was going to send Morris there himself after he gained experience in the 9th area. Henry thanked the commander, but then Aslan asked, since the lieutenant was so eager to get a serious assignment, can he come up with something? Our hero was slightly tense, but said that he was ready to listen to the instructions of the commander. Aslan told Tinny to give him Carter's papers. She placed the envelope in Henry's hands. While he was taking the documents out of the envelope, the commander asked, does he know who the previous lieutenant was? He said he knew, and it was Lieutenant Carter. Aslan continued that he died while doing his duty on the mission. And didn't Henry wonder what the assignment was? Henry tensed even more and thought the commander was a sly bastard. The task was clearly not easy. A mission postponed due to the death of a former lieutenant. The fact that the commander reminded our hero of it meant that it was urgent. That was the problem. But he said out loud that he sometimes thought about it. The commander clearly knew this, and he said that for a long time, Carter was being chased by a demon named Rabble. It was said that he hunted people for fun. Henry thought he hadn't heard of demons in a long time. He asked why Lieutenant Carter was following him. How many incidents was the demon responsible for? Aslan said that Carter found out about the mob's existence when he was a platoon leader in an infantry unit. He was patrolling the 7th area when the demon attacked his squad. Then the lieutenant lost a lot of men. Seeing the commander's jaw tighten, Henry guessed they were pretty close. Aslan confirmed that they were closely related. Henry noticed that Carter must have been a loyal man. The commander nodded and added that the asshole was always full of dedication and enthusiasm. Then Henry realized that Lieutenant Carter had joined the Special Forces to avenge his fallen comrades. The commander confirmed this as well. In fact, he had given him this task himself so that he could do retribution. In any case, he needed a strong and talented person in this field. And of all the Special Forces lieutenants, he was the most experienced. Henry thought that the deceased Carter was an idiot who had gone too far for revenge. He was definitely setting a bad example for the soldiers. He should have returned his things to them as soon as possible. Aslan continued, when a demon is full, it usually doesn't hunt. But this scumbag keeps killing just to amuse himself. This mission started with Carter wanting revenge, but lately the mob has been causing a lot of trouble. Special troops must destroy it. Henry said he understood. The commander slapped our hero on the shoulder and advised him to be careful. The mob was a cunning son of a bitch. If the lieutenant dies, no one will be able to find his remains. Henry even wondered why he was giving him this assignment. Back at headquarters, Morris examined all the documents that had been handed to him. Demons were usually found in 3 areas. If it really is a demon, then everything is quite problematic. In the documents about Cherney, it was said that he was able to change his appearance. Although the mob originates from the 6th region, it is also seen in the 7th and 8th regions. The mob was highly intelligent, able to understand and use human language. The mob possessed a huge amount of sinister power, and no one knew what it really looked like. Carter had been collecting this information for 5 years, but he had never learned anything important, so the work threatened to be much harder. But Lieutenant Morris should definitely have gone on a reconnaissance mission. He called the squad sergeant. I informed him that their Arlanda mission had been replaced. At lunchtime, they would go to the 6th area. The sergeant major even asked the commander again. He remarked that he was sure the sergeant knew the name Rabble. The guy confirmed this with a noticeable flinch. Henry explained that he had been assigned a mission by Lieutenant Carter. He'd love to go out there and catch the bastard, but that's easier said than done. The information that Carter had gathered was useless, so I had to start from scratch. You would like to hold a short meeting before starting the mission. I asked the sergeant to tell the others about it. After the sergeant confirmed that he understood, Henry handed him the box. They were the old lieutenant's real stuff. He didn't actually burn them. They hadn't conceived anything for him, so it was up to them to decide their fate, and asked if Jibo was okay. The sergeant replied that Jibo was fine. Then, trembling slightly and obviously holding back his emotions, he thanked the lieutenant and apologized for the behavior of the entire squad. Henry smiled softly and said that everything was fine, but if the guys do something like that again, he won't hesitate to punish them. The sergeant suddenly saluted the lieutenant, which confused him. He even said that such gestures were too hasty. When the sergeant left, Henry thought he was a little silly, but he needed to prepare for the mission. By lunchtime, the Special Forces unit assigned by the commander himself, Lieutenant Henry Morris, and 9 of his men, had gathered in the courtyard of headquarters. Henry informed the squad that they were going to explore the 6th area. The squad responded readily. The bridge descended, opening the exit from the headquarters to the forest for the detachment. Henry gave the order to leave. Henry Morris's party set out to reconnoiter. The lieutenant, looking around, couldn't help but reminisce. It's been a long time, and this place hasn't changed, just as gloomy as before. It reminded Henry of old times. It was necessary to get to the 6th area as quickly as possible. As soon as they stepped off the bridge, Morris cast the Unity spell, a magic that connected people's minds. And it was thanks to her that the path to the desired zone was safe. But the soldiers from the squad couldn't figure out what day it was. It's clear and sunny, and we haven't seen a single monster yet. But for some, on the contrary, this caused a good feeling. Soon, Henry and his men reached the safe zone of Sector 6. Our hero even chuckled. He did not think that here they used the magic of Unity created by himself. The squad sat down to rest, and Henry decided that this was the perfect time to hold another meeting. He attracted the attention of his men. He said they were here to catch the mob. Lieutenant Morris studied Lieutenant Carter's notes on the creature, and to be honest, they are useless, so he plans to start all over again. According to the scouts, this rank 6 demon could communicate with humans. Also, don't forget that the mob has a demonic aura that is hundreds of times stronger than normal. And now that everyone understood their purpose, it was worth searching for. Henry pulled the drawing out of his pocket and showed it to the others. Here was a picture of a blood mushroom. This demonic spawn grew in the 5th and higher regions. The sergeant noticed that they were now in the 6th. Henry nodded. That's why they needed to find him. Such mushrooms needed a demonic aura of the same level as the rabble. Then the sergeant realized what the commander was driving at. What he meant to say was that if the mob is really a rank 6 demon, then mushrooms should grow where that thing once visited, right? He confirmed it with a smile. And it was necessary to divide into 2 groups, but remain alert. The lieutenant told me to meet you here in 6 hours. He led one group by himself, and the second moved under the guidance of a sergeant. Henry handed him a magic scroll. He asked to use it in case of an emergency, and then he would know the location of the second group. Henry added that it was a gift from the commander, so you had to be careful. He actually made this scroll himself, but who cares? Soon, the 2 groups dispersed in different directions, starting to comb the forest. When Henry's group was well out of the safe zone, one of the men decided to ask the lieutenant a question. He was pretty sure Henry was new, and he wondered how he knew that the blood mushroom could be used like this. Henry replied with an air of simplicity that he had read about it in a book about the nature of the forest of evil. I had to try really hard to remember everything. The fighters were delighted, and Henry knew they'd believe it. In fact, species from the 5th region cannot grow naturally in the 6th. He personally raised the blood mushroom to protect his treasures. This is a kind of treasure indicator. He even felt a little sorry that he was using people for something so trivial. But the treasure was supposed to help them find the mob, so it wasn't cheating. But the search was a failure. Henry's group found nothing, and when they got back to the safe zone, the second group was already there, tired and upset. Was it really all for nothing? They were all exhausted, but they did not manage to find the blood mushroom. The soldiers watching the lieutenant thought that Henry didn't look like Lieutenant Carter, but he tried just as hard. And yet they were impertinent to such a noble man. Many people felt inferior because they never found a single mushroom. So far, the sergeant and the rest of the squad thought they shouldn't care that their lieutenant was a rookie, and that from now on they would do everything possible to serve their lieutenant with the utmost respect, Henry's mind was filled with thoughts of treasure. The misunderstanding only continued to increase. That night, when everyone was back at headquarters, Henry drew a summoning circle. Hector stepped out of the otherworldly gate. The ghost even noticed that a long time had passed since their last meeting. Henry asked how he was doing. Hector didn't answer the question, but asked if Henry wasn't supposed to be in the army. He replied that he had already reached the rank of lieutenant, and now he has to deal with painfully arrogant people. Hector asked who dared to look down on his disciple. Henry replied that some people doubted his abilities, so he had to plug them with his sword. Hector complimented him on his good work. To think that he could easily defeat any swordsman now. What about progress? Has Henry regained his aura yet? Henry honestly admitted that progress was fucked up. Recently, he has been busy with a very problematic mission imposed on him, so there is no time for training at all. Hector asked what the problem mission was. Henry explained that there was something in the forest of evil that really bothered him. Hector asked what it was and how important it was. Henry wondered how he could tell the long story, but still, he had to spend some time explaining everything to the ghost. After listening to our hero, Hector concluded that his student will not be able to train until he catches the mob. He confirmed it. Ghost noticed that it was really lousy. Then why wouldn't he do his best to catch it? Henry replied with annoyance that it was only verbally easy. Hector clicked his tongue. How could a magician like Henry Morris be so stupid? Morris looked at the ghost blankly. He explained that he was taking too long a path, without seeing the short one right in front of your nose. Why would he look for a demon if he could just ask a witness? It took Henry a moment to understand. The ghost explained that, as Henry had said, the witness's name was Carter, and he had been chasing the demon for 5 years. Surely he is attached to something and cannot just leave the world. Our hero did not immediately understand. But when he understood Hector's words, he scolded himself for not having thought of it himself. He only needs to summon Carter's soul and ask him. So things that should contain most of Carter's essence. He seems to have figured that out. He asked Hector to wait a minute and ran back to the barracks. Although the ghost noticed that he had a lot of time, and he could take his time, Henry returned with an envelope containing reports on the mob. This was definitely the most important of all his possessions. As the ghost watched Henry draw a new summoning circle, he asked what would happen to him if he summoned another one. Our hero honestly admitted that he was not sure about the result, but there should be no serious problems. Hector had nothing to say. Henry chanted a spell, then ordered Carter to appear before him. The circle lit up, the gate opened, but no matter how much our hero called the deceased lieutenant, no one came to his call. When he was exhausted and sat down on the flagstones of the courtyard, Hector noticed that perhaps Carter's soul simply wasn't in the afterlife. Henry wasn't sure what he was talking about. Why shouldn't it be there? Hector said he wasn't sure, especially since Morris had absolute knowledge of magic. Henry even clarified why he decided to do it. He replied that few people can open the gate to another world. But Henry still couldn't figure out what the problem was right now. Hector suggested that, as far as he understood, the wizard used necromancy to summon the souls of the dead. But what if Carter didn't show up because he's still alive? Henry exhaled loudly and got to his feet. Hector might well be right, so he had an idea. Carter wasn't the only one affected by the mob. I needed to talk to his former subordinates. Ghost noticed that it would be difficult to summon those who died 5 years ago. Where would Morris find their stuff? Our hero replied that of all the places in the fort, only one came to mind. Cradle of Heroes. Those whose bodies were not found were buried here, not in a grave. Hector expressed doubt that the right things could be here, but it was the only place where they could be found. Henry remembered that according to one of Carter's reports, one of the soldiers was named Holterbelt. It was not difficult to find his memorial place. Magically, the lieutenant removed the medallion of a fallen warrior from a small display case. Without going too far, Henry drew a new summoning circle and placed the medallion in the center. That night, the gate opened for the 3rd time, and this time, the summoned one answered the call and appeared before the magician. When the ghost woke up, he was slightly confused, looked around, and then asked the summoner who he was. Henry Morris introduced himself as a lieutenant in the Special Operations Group that was under the control of Commander Aslan. He explained that he had summoned Holterbelt because of Lieutenant Carter. Ghost even asked if he meant the commander of his squad. Henry explained that during Holterbelt's lifetime, he had indeed been a commander, but later he was promoted to lieutenant of the Special Purpose Group. And now Lieutenant Carter is missing because of the demon mob. The poor ghost buried his face in his hands, unable to hold back the tears. When he managed to calm down, he apologized. Holterbelt felt so sorry for his commander, who had fought alone for 5 years. Henry assured him that he understood perfectly, but he needed to know what the mob looked like. The soldier replied that he did not know this, but there was something that everyone was wrong about. This creature didn't just transform, but used the stolen bodies. Henry even asked if he meant the bodies of other living things. Hoderbelt confirmed this. The mob was like an evil spirit. As soon as it got close to its companion, it immediately jumped into another body through its mouth. This surprised Henry a little, as he had never encountered a spirit that used this method of movement before. Hoderbelt continued that then the mob and revealed their plan to him. He was going to be a demon. Those were the last words the soldier heard before he died. Henry wondered if they were talking about moving on to a new stage. The transition was made when the evil spirit had enough dark energy to turn into a demon. Henry deduced that 5 years ago, the mob was just preparing to become a demon. If he managed to reincarnate, it wouldn't be too bad for them. Things were bad. Then Hoderbelt remembered something else. As he froze in fear, the thing told him to consider it an honor to be eaten by a future demon. After that, it entered the soldier's mind, and everything was mixed up at once. He sensed how much the mob enjoyed killing, and he caught the scent that had led him to the party, a smell full of pleasure. That's right, the spirit was attracted by their smell. Henry asked Hoderbelt to remember what that smell was, and he remembered that they had used the same cologne sold by the merchant. The soldier thought it was the smell that made the mob want him, or so it seemed to him. Henry asked him the name of the cologne, and he assumed the lieutenant had heard it. Febracy. Henry was already wondering where to get this cologne when the dead man asked him to do one of his requests. He didn't want revenge. The soldier only wanted to pass on his thanks to Lieutenant Carter if he could be found. And with tears in his eyes, the ghost disappeared. Behind the lieutenant, Hector let out a sigh of relief. He thought that the spirit would curse his disciple. Henry even got angry at the suggestion. But the ghost, saying that he obviously did everything he could, also disappeared. In the early morning, Commander Aslan was clearly displeased with Lieutenant Henry's visit. Did he come to see him so early because he wanted to buy cologne somewhere? Is he kidding me? Henry said we should jump at any chance to catch the mob. Aslan sighed. He understood the subordinate's position, but he couldn't let him leave. But then Lady Tinny came back into the study. She apologized for waiting, but there was a bottle of perfume in her hands. She asked if that was what Lieutenant Morris meant when he spoke of Febracy. This was exactly what our hero needed. But Tinny didn't want to give away her cologne for nothing. She wanted something in return, and she asked to be given the opportunity to voice her request in her ear. Henry leaned toward her, and she whispered, "Can they have dinner sometime this weekend?" Henry smiled a little and agreed to the condition. And now they were back in the 6th area of the Forest of Evil. Henry showed them a bottle of cologne and asked if anyone had ever seen anything like it in Lieutenant Carter's clothes. But no one remembered. The lieutenant considered. If this is true, then why was Carter attacked? Had Hoderbelt's memories been wrong? But it was time for them to leave anyway. Today, their goal was the same as yesterday. Break into groups and continue searching for blood mushrooms. After announcing the beginning of the search, and waiting for the soldiers to disperse, our hero applied unity. That way, his guys won't get mixed up in anything. Henry sprayed himself with cologne, then cast the Raging Fragrance spell. This spell was usually used by female magicians to enhance the fragrance of perfume. Who knew Henry would have to use it, too? The fragrance of the cologne quickly spread through the forest and reached a remote cave. It was inhabited by minotaurs, and one of them, the oldest and most powerful white bull, recognized the smell. He didn't believe it at first, because he hadn't smelled it in years. He just couldn't show up. But it soon became clear even to him that he wasn't imagining the smell. His eyes lit up with scarlet fire, and his wild roar surprised all of them. At this time, Henry was advancing through the forest, and nothing changed. Perhaps the memories were indeed wrong. Apparently, we'll have to call in and interrogate the other victims. But right now, he had to do everything in his power. Unity and a Raging Fragrance were used again. The group continued to advance, and at some point, a flock of birds flew up from a nearby tree. There was a roar and a clatter of hooves behind them. The sergeant assumed that the minotaurs were approaching, half humans, half fangs. But then there was another strange sound. Henry froze, listening, and in the next instant, he was struck by lightning. Henry collapsed face first into the ground and seemed to stop moving. At the same time, a whole herd of minotaurs appeared from behind the trees. The soldiers grabbed their weapons. The sergeant ordered everyone to calm down. Even if they killed the lieutenant, they must remain calm. He announced that he was taking command and ordered everyone to form up and start moving towards the safe zone. The soldiers couldn't believe their ears. Retreat. But they must avenge the lieutenant. The sergeant asked the question, how long are they going to behave like children? These are the minotaurs, and they'd better get out of here. Otherwise, everyone will die. He ordered them to take up their positions and retreat immediately. But before they could even take a step towards the safe zone, a large white minotaur blocked their path. He was the source of the lightning. Jibo shouted that the bastard had blocked the retreat and expressed a wish to die in battle. The warrior demanded that no one try to stop him. Didn't they share his feelings? It was all the creature's fault. A comrade standing next to the sergeant said that they needed to advance. How would they look people in the eye after losing 2 lieutenants? The sergeant had no counter-arguments left. He gave the go-ahead to the others. If they die, it will be here. The squad rushed at the opponents. A battle ensued, and it can be said that the forces were even equal. At that moment, the white minotaur sniffed the air and moved towards the source of the attractive smell, Lieutenant Morris lying on the ground. Out of the corner of his eye, Jibo saw the creature move toward the lieutenant. He wanted to eat his corpse. Unwilling to allow such a thing to happen, the knight lunged at the minotaur, but the minotaur simply elbowed him away. Jibo fell to the ground. The monster roared, and its horns sparkled with lightning. Deciding that this was the end, the fighter only managed to cover himself with his hands, but the lightning never hit him. Jibo opened his eyes and saw Lieutenant Morris, fully alive, taking the lightning on his sword. To be more precise, it pierced a magic scroll that used the rabble in the white minotaur's body to summon lightning. Crumpling the now useless piece of paper, Henry reached out to help his fighter to his feet. The lieutenant told them to tell the rest of the squad that he was all right, and ordered to survive at any cost. Jibo even shed tears of happiness, said that he understood the commander, and rushed to his comrades. But our hero had his own battle ahead of him. He asked the minotaur if he was the one who struck him with lightning. The monster roared in response. Henry grabbed his sword and charged. The minotaur swung a hand at the lieutenant, but the latter easily parried the blow. The monster wasn't that strong. Henry managed to kick his opponent away from him with one powerful kick. While he was trying to regain his balance, our hero caught the moment, and with one powerful blow of the sword cut off the minotaur's head. She fell to the ground, rolling to the side. Black blood spurted out in all directions, and a few drops even splashed onto Henry's face. It was unpleasant, and he hurried to erase them. Then he went to the head to make sure the demon was dead. But then the head spoke. To be more precise, she called her body a useless bastard. Dark scarlet smoke slowly billowed out of the severed neck, but in the next instant, it jerked the minotaur's head straight up in Henry's direction. The demon voice announced that the lieutenant was honored to be his new body. Smoke shot straight at the mage's face, but the mage blocked it with a magic barrier. Oh no, it won't work with him. He'll get the mob at all costs. Henry imbued the sword with magic and cut the head in half with one sharp blow. The evil spirit was left without a body, and now only looked like a clot of dark scarlet smoke with 2 burning eyes. Our hero noticed that this creature is very interesting. No longer a spirit, but not yet a demon. What the hell is it? Maybe a doppelganger or something. However, what difference does it make if it disappears now? Henry attacked the mob with a bright flash of magic. When the shapeless creature realized that it was a mage, it immediately dodged the flash and ran in the opposite direction. Seeing that the enemy was running away, the lieutenant cast the spell Return to Bodies, which was created to search for dead bodies of soldiers. Using magic, tracking the mob wasn't a problem. The ghost darted between the trees like a frightened shadow. He had to urgently find a new body to escape from the pursuit. And then he saw a bear calmly eating a wild boar he had killed. The spirit rushed into his mouth, instantly occupying his primitive consciousness. A few seconds later, the mage who was chasing the mob appeared in the clearing. He realized that he had to act like a bear and then he wouldn't get caught, so he went back to what the bear was doing, eating prey. Henry noticed the demonic bear, and the magic immediately told him the truth. Our hero pretended at first to believe this game, taking a step past, but after a moment turned around and with one blow of the sword felled the possessed animal. The same black blood splashed onto the ground. The mob decided to hide in the dead beast, but Henry set it on fire with a spell. The spirit leaped out of the fire. He flew up to the magician and asked how he guessed. But the lieutenant was only interested in one thing. Where was Carter? The spirit angrily asked why he would tell the man anything. Henry sighed wearily. He'd have to get the mob talking. With a snap of his fingers, he encased the spirit in a block of ice. The frightened creature asked, "Who is this magician?" But Henry snapped that he was the one asking the questions. He snapped his fingers. The block of ice began to crack, causing unbearable pain to the evil entity. The mob screamed in pain. Henry asked if he was going to talk. He started to whine about why he was being treated like this, but another flash of pain clearly made him change his mind. Finally, the mob gave up. He promised to tell me everything, so long as they didn't kill me. Henry demanded that the spirit show him the way to Carter. The evil spirit led our hero to his cave at the very edge of the 6th area of the Forest of Evil. Once inside, Henry did indeed see the lieutenant sitting in the corner. He was sitting on the floor with his back to the wall, and he was clearly unconscious. He didn't respond to the call. His sword lay nearby. As Henry approached him, the mob lunged forward and flew into Lieutenant Carter's half-open mouth, taking over his mind. Opening the eyes of the new body, the spirit brazenly asked, did the mage think that it was so easy to subdue him? But Morris just grunted. He'd been waiting for this. At this time, the mob grabbed a sword lying nearby and angrily asked what's so funny. Henry noticed that the sword was imbued with an aura. The mob could use the aura of the body's owner. The evil spirit claimed that Lieutenant Morris would pay for his torment, and the trophy will be his body. As Henry took a closer look at the counter, he realized that the mob was nothing more than a parasite. The enemy charged, shouting that they would kill Henry, but his blows were so clumsy that it was easy to dodge. It only took one hard poke in the back to send the possessed man tumbling to the stone floors of the cave. The lieutenant replied that the mob was just an evil demonic spirit. The mob got angry, but our hero continued that he could only talk and use someone else's aura. Being able to use it didn't mean being good with a sword. It takes years or even decades of practice to master a blade. Morris cast an immobility spell on the body. Then he announced that there was no escape for the spirit now, and he expressed the hope that he realized the difference between them. The mob left Lieutenant Carter's body and begged for mercy. But did Henry demand to know who he was first? The spirit asked hopefully if the man would spare him if he told him. Henry promised to think about it. Cherney told me that his real name was Clover. He is a simple demonic spirit and the last survivor of his kind. In the demonic language, they were called Alauras. Imitators, Henry translated. Clover did not immediately understand what the man was talking about, and Tom had to explain that this was a translation of their name into human language. He didn't know that imitators had similar abilities, but the mage had heard enough. Now he could get rid of it. The Clover screeched, reminding him that the man had promised to spare him. But Henry noted that he had only promised to think about it. The spirit was not ready to give up its life, and suddenly threw a silver coin at the lieutenant's feet. Our hero was distracted by it, but when he looked up, he was stunned. Mountains of gold, jewelry, and valuable weapons appeared in the middle of the cave. Clover prayed that if he was released, he would give all the riches to the mage. A dumbfounded Henry asked, where did a mere demonic spirit get such treasures? The spirit explained in a confused voice that this was one of its abilities. He has been collecting this wealth for years. He begged to be allowed to exchange all these riches for his life. There were even tears in her voice. Henry thought about it. The deal was very tempting. But the rare ability to collect jewels was even more tempting.